The laboratory notebook kept at Bayer's works in Elberfeld records the synthesis of acetylsalicylic acid on the 10th of August, 1897. 11 days later, on the 21st of August, the same notebook records diacetylmorphine. One reaction, run twice, at the same bench. The first of those two compounds is now in almost every home on Earth. The second one is heroin. That 11-day window produced the most widely used drug in human history, and one of the most destructive substances ever sold legally, by the same chemical trick. But the story of aspirin does not begin in that laboratory, and it does not begin with a chemist. It begins with a country parson, in an Oxfordshire meadow, chewing a piece of bark. In 1763, Edward Stone, a clergyman in Chipping Norton, put a strip of willow bark in his mouth and found it almost unbearably bitter. The bitterness was the point. The only reliable fever remedy in Europe was Peruvian bark, shipped at enormous cost from South America, and it tasted the same. Stone reasoned that a tree growing in wet ground would cure the fevers that rose out of wet ground. That reasoning is entirely wrong. He was right anyway. He stripped a pound of bark, dried it 3 months in a paper bag beside a baker's oven, ground it to powder, and gave it in water to about 50 parishioners with fever. The dose was 2 scruples, roughly 2.5 grams, about 5 modern tablets at once, every 4 hours. It worked on nearly all of them. 50 people. He wrote it up for the Royal Society, and the trail went cold for 65 years, because nobody could say what was inside the bark. So chemists went looking for it. In 1828, a German pharmacologist pulled the active compound out of the bark and named it salicin. A year later, a French pharmacist recovered 30 grams of pure salicin from 1.5 kilograms of bark, an armful stripped from a mature tree for a single handful of crystals. By 1838, an Italian chemist had converted salicin into something simpler and far more potent, salicylic acid. And in 1859, Hermann Kolbe worked out how to build it from coal tar, with no tree involved. A factory opened outside Dresden in 1874 to make it by the ton, and the price collapsed. For the first time, an effective painkiller was cheap and unlimited. Physicians prescribed it as sodium salicylate for rheumatic fever, at 5 to 10 grams a day. 10 grams a day. That is roughly 30 modern tablets a day, for weeks. And it ruined the stomach. Patients vomited. Their ears rang. The lining bled. Willow worked. The stomach did not survive it. And nobody could build a version people could keep taking. But a dye works in the Rhineland had the chemistry to try. Bayer was not a drug company. It made synthetic colors, and dye chemistry is coal tar chemistry, which supplied the benzene rings medicine needed. The problem was the acid group itself, which attacked the stomach wall on contact. The fix proposed at Elberfeld was to cap it, bolt an acetyl group onto the molecule as a wrapper the stomach cannot tear open and the bloodstream can. On the 10th of August, 1897, the notebook records the result in pure and stable form, described in the entry as carrying an acid taste without any corrosive action. That one modification is why hundreds of millions of people can take a salicylate daily. The 10th of August, 1897. That date matters twice. The signature belongs to Felix Hoffmann, a chemist of 29. Whether the idea was his has never been settled. In 1944, Arthur Eichengrun, a Jewish chemist who had run Bayer's pharmaceutical laboratory and was by then interned at Theresienstadt, wrote that he had directed the synthesis and that Hoffmann had carried it out without being told why. He published it in 1949, shortly before he died. A reappraisal in the British Medical Journal in 2000 made a detailed case that he was telling the truth. Bayer rejects it, and the surviving documents close the question in neither direction. The notebook does not record whose idea it was. It records when, and the compound it recorded went straight into a cupboard. But it was not a chemist who put it there. Pharmacology did, and pharmacology at Elberfeld was Heinrich Dresser. Dresser turned it down, on the grounds that it would weaken the heart. It stayed there for roughly 18 months. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. 11 days after the entry that produced it, the laboratory ran the same reaction again. Acetylation is one step, the chemical equivalent of putting a coat on a molecule, and the coat fits almost anything. The same reagent, acetic anhydride, a different starting material. On the 21st of August, 1897, the notebook records diacetylmorphine. 11 days. The compound was not new. An English chemist, Charles Alder Wright, had boiled morphine with acetic anhydride in a London hospital in 1874, tested it on a dog, watched the animal turn frightened and unsteady, and dropped it. Nobody returned to it for 23 years. Dresser did. He ran it on workers at the plant, and the reports described strength and clarity. The German word in those reports was heroisch, heroic. Bayer took that word, cut it short, and trademarked it in 1898. The brand name they gave the second molecule is still a word in English. So Bayer sold it. Heroin went to market in 1898 as a cough medicine, over the counter, in bottles and syrup, and the claim on the literature was that it lacked the habit-forming properties of morphine. The reasoning behind that claim was chemical, and it was the reasoning that had produced aspirin. Acetylation makes a molecule dissolve more readily in fat. That is what let acetylsalicylic acid through the stomach without burning it. It is also what lets diacetylmorphine through the barrier protecting the brain, which is built of fat, and which it crosses far faster than morphine can. Once across, the body strips the acetyl groups away, and what is left is morphine, delivered more efficiently than morphine delivers itself. The modification that made the first drug gentle made the second drug stronger, and the cough market in 1898 meant tuberculosis, whooping cough, bronchitis, and children. Tuberculosis was then killing more people in Europe than any other disease, and there was nothing else to give. This is the part of the story that most people never learn about. Heroin preparations were sold with dosing tables for infants and children, and pharmacists across Europe and America dispensed them on the manufacturer's assurance. A parent in 1899 could measure a spoonful of heroin syrup for a child with whooping cough, follow the printed instructions exactly, and be doing what the label said. Think about that. If you are finding this interesting, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week, and you will not want to miss what is coming next. It stayed on open sale in the United States for 16 years. 16 years. By 1910, the medical journals were carrying case reports of patients whose addiction had begun with a remedy for a cough. Every one of them had taken it exactly as directed. Nobody had gone looking for it. It was handed to them across a counter by somebody they trusted. Bayer halted production in 1913. In 1924, the United States Congress banned its manufacture, import, and sale outright, and the word a company had coined for a heroic feeling became the name of the most stigmatized drug on earth. Bayer took two products out of one reaction and spent its reputation on the wrong one. But the compound in the cupboard had not gone anywhere. Bayer overruled Dresser and put acetylsalicylic acid on the market in 1899 under a name built from its own chemistry, the acetyl group, the meadowsweet plant spirea, the other natural source of salicylic acid, and a standard drug ending, aspirin. It went out first as a loose powder weighed at the counter, then from 1900 as a stamped tablet. A stamped tablet carries a fixed dose and a maker's mark, and it made the drug identical in every chemist's shop on Earth. Aspirin built the template every drug company has used since. One molecule, one name, one dose, sold everywhere. Physicians adopted it because it did what sodium salicylate did without the burning, and within 15 years, it was the best-selling drug on the planet. 15 years. Then Germany lost the war. The aspirin trademark went with it, struck down or surrendered in the United States, Britain, France, and Russia under the settlement of 1919, and a brand name became a common noun in 4 countries at once, the way escalator and thermos did. Anybody could make it. Everybody did. And nobody could explain how it worked. So it took 74 years to find out. 74 years. In 1971, in a laboratory in London, John Vane established that aspirin shuts down prostaglandins, the compounds that generate pain, fever, and inflammation. It does this with the same acetyl group Bayer bolted on in 1897, which fastens permanently onto the enzyme that makes them. Vane received the Nobel Prize in 1982, but the answer arrived with an invoice attached, because prostaglandins do not only carry pain signals, they also maintain the mucus layer that stops the stomach from digesting itself. Aspirin cannot switch off the first without switching off the second, because a single enzyme performs both jobs and the drug disables the switch. The acetyl group did not solve the problem Bayer set out to solve. It moved the damage from the surface of the stomach into the chemistry underneath. Every ulcer aspirin has ever caused was caused by the drug doing the job it was sold to do. The constraint of 1897 was never removed. It was relocated, and it surfaced in the group that swallowed the drug on somebody else's judgment. So the people who paid for it first were children. Through the 1970s, pediatricians in several countries were recording a rare and violent illness in children recovering from influenza or chickenpox, swelling of the brain, liver failure, and death in roughly a third of cases. It was named Reyes syndrome. In 1980, the United States recorded 555 cases in a single year. 555. The common factor was aspirin, given for the fever of the original infection, exactly as the packet instructed. The Surgeon General issued a warning in 1982. Mandatory labeling followed in 1986. Reported cases fell to roughly 2 a year by the mid-1990s. A fall from 555 to 2 is not a trend. It is a switch being turned off. For the second time, a product out of that laboratory had to be taken from children by law. The line on the packet telling parents not to give it to anyone under 16 exists because of those children. No equivalent line was ever written for adults. But for adults, the trade is still being made. Roughly 40,000 tons of aspirin are manufactured every year, enough for an estimated 100 billion tablets, more than a dozen for every person alive. Most of it is no longer swallowed for pain. It is swallowed in low daily doses to thin the blood, and about 29 million Americans take one every morning. 29 million. Roughly 10 million of them have no cardiovascular disease at all, and millions began without a physician telling them to. And the mechanism that thins the blood is the mechanism that strips the stomach, because it is the same enzyme and the same acetyl group. Bleeding from the stomach and gut remains one of the commonest drug-related causes of emergency admission in the developed world. In 2022, the body that sets American preventive guidance concluded that adults over 60 should not begin taking it. Nothing about the drug had changed. What changed was the arithmetic, which now says that for a healthy person of 60, the bleeding outweighs the benefit. The trade was never abolished. It was finally priced. The story of aspirin runs from a bag of bark drying beside a baker's oven to a chemical plant turning the same molecule out by the ton. Aspirin was never simply a painkiller. It was a trade, and the terms of it have not changed. It was there when the first cheap painkiller reached ordinary people and took their stomachs in exchange. It was there when one laboratory ran a single reaction twice in 11 days and put both results on the market. It was there when a company printed a promise of safety on a bottle of heroin, and again 80 years later when parents gave a fever medicine to children on the same promise. A parson, in an Oxfordshire parish, chewing bark for the wrong reason, began a chain that ends in an industrial reactor. It ended pain that had no other remedy. It built the modern pharmaceutical industry. It named the drug that defines addiction. And it is in the packet in your bathroom cabinet, behind the mirror, exactly where you left it. If this story surprised you, subscribe for more deep dives into the true price of the ordinary things around you. We have got a lot more coming.